this evening. It's been over a week that the communal violence rocked new adjoining areas in Haryana and reached the Millennium City, Gurugram. Lives have been lost, public and private property has been damaged, daily lives have been disrupted, and there is an uncomfortable sense of calm that looms over the region. And at the crux of the communal violence is alleged insightful social media posting. Now, hate posts that were circulated online before and after the July 31st violence are likely to have aggravated the violence which continued unabated. Acting against these very hate posts, the Gurugram police has now buckled up to quell the violence and restore normalcy. The police force in Gurugram has gotten social media platforms to take down 200 such hate-spewing posts. 4 accounts that were found to be circulating these posts have been blocked, while the Gurugram cops have sent a request to suspend 16 similar accounts. Of the 4 accounts blocked, 2 were Facebook accounts, while other 2 were Twitter accounts. And now a Pakistani connection has come to light. Gurugram police is now probing the role of a YouTube channel apparently run by a Pakistani blogger and a Facebook page called Mio Army for their role in instigating the violence. Now, what's interesting about this Facebook page particularly is that it surfaced just a few days before the incident and was involved in uploading a series of provocative posts. DCP South Gurugram, Siddhant Jain, who heads the cyber police station, said a 20-member police team are scanning posts with keywords like new violence, rioting, and revenge. Now, the Haryana government has also formed a 4-member panel to monitor social media in relation to the new incident. To take this conversation further and also, of course, the implications of such instances, let me take this forward with our guests who are joining me on the broadcast. Shri Parthasarthi, Cyber Defense and Threat Intelligence Expert, Arvind Kumar Jain, ex-DGP UP, and Advocate Chirag Nayak, MZM Legal LLP. Good evening to all three of you. Thank you very much for taking the time out and joining us here on Mirror Now. Parthasarthi, let me begin by asking you this. You know, there was a point when we would talk about the boon of social media, but this is looking like the other aspect, which is the bane of social media, especially in such instances, especially when we're talking about inciting tension in the community.
I think whenever there are advents of technology, there's always the boon and the bane. And I think the bad actors always come in terms of misuse of this particular, any of these particular technologies. So I think it's the responsibility, and when I talk responsibility, not just the responsibility of the government, right? I think it's a responsibility of public-private partnership, how we essentially counter these particular aspects. And this particular element, when you're really looking at what happened in new, is not essentially new. It has happened. Things have happened in China. Things have happened in US. Things have happened in UK. Things have happened, and bringing it home very near. If you take Jammu and Kashmir, you look at Manipur, and now with no, these kind of things will continue to spread unabated if we do not do the right controlling and monitoring of that. The challenge with this kind of technology, when you really look at it, is essentially the quantity of information that is coming at you. One is that. Second is essentially the virality of that information. Just to give the users some particular facts on this, Facebook has almost like 300 million new photos daily. Twitter has 6,000 tweets per second. YouTube has 14 billion views weekly. And then if you take any of the other social media platforms, they all essentially have a significant quantity of information. So I think one of the key things is important for us to really look at it and think back is this issue of social media and misuse and misinformation of social media, whether it is to instigate violence, whether it is politically instigated, whether it is essentially to spread disinformation, or whether it is for cyberbullying. All of these essentially can be controlled if we take a step back and look at it in a way of thinking about all of this information and putting certain organized structure around it. One of the big things is essentially how do we operate coherently and how do we have an integrated structure on this? Because essentially today we are operating on an attention economy. And the economy in this particular sense essentially is, as they look at information, they are going to disallow any information which essentially not aligned with their particular views. They're going to primarily look at those particular views and sort of get more energized by that. And that essentially is something that we need to basically look at and take care. Identifying, monitoring, classifying and countering this through technical aspects are going to be very, very critical. And this cannot be done alone. I think the social media company, the platform, the large platform that we have, have to come and basically come into the picture in terms of essentially managing it. Because the virality of these particular posts is all generated by algorithms that they have in the background, and these are the algorithms that essentially what we call it social media misinformation or SMM. These are the things that basically accelerate them. But with that kind of infrastructure and with the government and the public-private partnership, I think we can put certain structures. One is in terms of the policy. Second is in terms of the technical infrastructure to basically monitor it and to be very proactive about it. All of which essentially, if it comes together, I think we would be in a better shape in terms of controlling this. But what I would like to say is this is not new, but switching off the internet is not essentially the solution. On one side, we are moving into what we call as a digital economy. And on the other side, if we switch off internet and if we switch off payment mechanisms and other things, we are hurting the pocket of the citizen. We are hurting their livelihood because people essentially are using internet today, whether it's for direction, whether it's for financial payment, whether it is for trading and all of those, and shutting off the internet. For example, in Manipur, we have shut it off for 83 days. That is not a solution. I think the solution is essentially how do we manage it more effectively, bringing all the stakeholders in and then effectively managing it going forward. Back to you.
Right, Parthasarathi. As you make those significant points, we'll come back and discuss, the additional aspects of it as to how one can counter it. But let me get in a word in from Arvind Kumar Jain. Mr. Jain, how do you see a situation like this, especially when law and order is affected?
There has been a terrible communal incident in Nuh, which is very close to Gurugram, Delhi, Faridabad, all these commercial hubs, very important cities, especially Gurugram. It's called Millennium City. So naturally, man, there were incidents of communal violence in Gurugram also after there was violence in Nuh. So a counter reaction was there. So it's very necessary for Gurugram police also to take effective preventive measures to prevent such escalation in Gurugram. It is very important because it sends wrong signals throughout the world. If there is violence in Nuh, it makes news. But if there is violence in Gurugram, which we witnessed at few places, it's very unfortunate. So naturally, Gurugram police has to identify the posts which is spreading hatred, and they are doing the right thing by doing it. They have formed a panel, and they are getting such posts removed. I think the more important aspect is you can't monitor entire social media. The important point is that you should identify the groups which are spreading hatred. There are certain groups of Hindus, of Muslims, of vigilantes and others. So such groups have to be identified, and action will have to be taken against them so that they are kept under check. That is very important. Gurugram police is, I think, taking steps in the right direction. They are trying to identify, they are getting removed such hate posts, and they are blocking the accounts. They are getting it done. So that is all right that they are supposed to do after incidents have taken place. But for future also, such groups have to be identified, and such groups should be on the radar of ATS, NIA, Intelligence Bureau, and action should be taken against these groups, and especially against few persons who are radicalizing the entire group members. So that is also very important. And it should be done. It should be done, and Gurugram police is taking the steps in the right direction.
Right. As we speak about that, with the fact that you have pointed out preventive measures also need to be taken, I'll get that point back in a couple of minutes. But let me go across to Advocate Chirag. Chirag, in your opinion, what are the cyber laws, if you could help that break it down for us, especially in instances of national security or inciting violence? When are these taken seriously?
Nivedita, when there are instances of public emergency or there's a public security issue, we have laws, we have a special order under the Telegraph Act which empowers the government to shut off all electronic and internet communication and even mobile communication of the public at large in specific areas. Of course, this is subject to a lot of review. There's a review committee which is established at the state level and the central level, which is supposed to, in a time-bound manner, assess whether such restriction on the rights of the public to access the internet or use communication devices can be continued on. Now, there are laws. There is specifically the 2017 order, which governs such banning. There has been an order specifically in Haryana passed on the 5th of August, which has restricted access to certain types of modes of communication and internet. Mind you, these lines, broadband lines which are used domestically and in offices are not affected. But of course, 2G, 3G, CDMA functions have been restricted to ensure peace and security. So there are temporary suspension of telecom rules which govern this. Be that as it may, I think the Supreme Court has already held that restriction on the internet and restriction on access to internet is a very drastic measure, and it has to be taken as at the last chance. If it's the last option available to the public or to the law enforcement authorities to prevent any misfortune. I think in this case, there has been a situation where the Haryana police was probably not well prepared and they were not surveilling the internet as, though it's a wide aspect, but it has to be surveilled. Social media is now not a new avenue. Sometimes the ramifications of what takes place in social media is more pronounced than in the real world. So like you have special units by the Delhi police, you have the IFSO unit, which is continuously monitoring the social media for different elements. I think we also need now mass surveillance on the internet like you do for your roads. You have a nice network of the police, which is continuously as an intelligence unit in the real world where, the police is monitoring each and every nook and corner of the city. Likewise, they need to do so for the internet also.
Right, Chirag. As you break that down for us, let me go across to Parthasarathy. Parthasarathy, of course, Chirag was talking to us about the legal aspect of this, but there are, two words that is in common with all the opinions that have just come in on the show is action and preventive measures, which you were also talking about significantly on that aspect of preventive measures. How does one combat this, and what could be the possible challenges as far as you speak about preventive measures?
Whether it is the world of cyber where there's cyber crime or whether it's in terms of the social media, I think one needs to understand the context of the platform and understand that it is very differently. And I think respected Sir Arvind Kumar Jain primarily talked about how to basically how they are stopping handles and actually take care of these particular groups. I think in the real world, when you have it, when there was no internet, essentially you go to a physical address, pick up the miscreants, pull them in, and then essentially put them in jail and those kind of things. But in the world of the internet, it is very amorphous. So what really happens is you close down one account, then it opens up like a hydra into 10 other accounts. And that is what really happens. And the anonymity and the amorphousness of the internet itself essentially is the big challenge. And the biggest aspect here is what we call it as early warning systems, and we call it what in the world of cyber we call it pattern detection, and we call it in terms of whether it's in terms of account, whether it's in terms of tweets, or whether it's in terms of any post. What you primarily look at is you look at the content, you look at the influencer, you look at the sentiment of that particular thing, and seeing whether what is it actually triggering off and all of that. And all of these essentially are easily manageable and detectable at a platform level in terms of looking. The oversight that Advocate Chirag Naik talked about, the oversight happens at that particular level where you have a bird's eye view of the internet. So, for example, if you're talking of a city, it's not that all the threat actors who are affecting your city are sitting inside your city. So essentially, the jurisdiction and everything that you possibly look at can be in across the country. It could be across the world. So the question is, How do you monitor all of those particular points of presence or those particular threat accounts from one? That is one aspect. Second is how do you create those particular early warning systems within your environment to detect these particular things and counter them before they happen? For example, if you take some of what happened in No, I think it's always 2020, hindsight is 2020. But what can be done is by the government is essentially to look at it very proactively in these kind of things as things develop. And all of these, when what we call on the internet is we call it chatter. When you look at the chatter, you need to analyze it, synthesize it, and then essentially see whether it can essentially follow the normal virality or essentially you basically suppress it. And that can be only done by the platform. In addition to that, when you take the law enforcement, all of this information from the platforms essentially has to feed directly into what you call as the counter intelligence center of the law enforcement so that they can have visibility across all of these particular platforms in a particular area from an ability to look at it from violence, look at it from a counter terror in terms of any atrocity or any kind of issue that is causing public safety, anything that's affecting public safety. They have to basically monitor it. Once they do that, then they have an ability to take what is real life on ground situation and manage what is there on the internet, bring them together, and then essentially take effective action. And this kind of information will only happen if we have intelligence feeds which come from multiple sources. We have intelligence on these particular platforms, which we enforce as policy as a government, saying that any of these social media platforms coming into this particular country, they have to provide it to the counter-terror forces or to the counterintelligence or the law enforcement forces or any other agency. And that essentially gets consolidated. They perform the analysis and then feed it into this, and which I think our police departments do very effectively, provided essentially we have a unified structure from that aspect. Once that information is brought in, then it's a question of how do you basically suppress the particular action even before it happens. And which is essentially where I go back to the aspect of the internet shutting down. As Advocate Chirag also said, internet shutting down is the last resort, right? Last mile resort that we primarily look at. But there are a variety of different things by policy, by enforcement, by technology, which actually need to be done ahead of time. Thank you.
Right, Parthasarathi, as you break that down for us and of course also talk about what challenges lies ahead, I want to thank all three of you for joining us on the show and sharing with us your perspective as well as far as this is concerned. But for the moment, we leave it at that.